Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Optimizing Management Reporter. My name is Sabrina, and I'm on the marketing team here at Stone Ridge Software. I'll be monitoring any questions that you have throughout the webinar today. You are muted, but there is a questions panel, and you can feel free to ask those there, and I will pass along the questions to Cory, our presenter. Additionally, this is being recorded. Receive a copy of the recording and some additional resources following today's webinar. Our presenter today is Cory Severson. He's a functional team manager on our Dynamics GP product team here, and he's our go-to for all things MR and reporting related. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Cory.
Thanks, Sabrina. Everybody's hearing me okay, I assume. So if not, Sabrina did say go ahead and ask questions. I will welcome questions during the presentation, so don't hesitate to ask anything throughout the process. So usually when going through Management Reporter, you get a wide range of folks on the phone, ranging from beginner to advanced level access. So I plan on covering the gamut today and going through all things that should help every level of a Management Reporter user. So here's what I expect to go over. I'm going to kind of just go through this without the slideshow view. What you can expect to get through the webinar today or get out of the webinar. Things to make your time in Management Reporter less time consuming. Just kind of ways to make things faster. Distributions, report groups, report scheduling, making your reports prettier, and how to validate data inside of your reports, and also know that your data mart is gathering good data and is up to date. So with that being said, I'm going to first start with the less time consuming part. First thing I want to do is go through the basics of opening Management Reporter, what you get with the install. So when you install it, Management Reporter installs two pieces. It makes it difficult for people to find Management Reporter on their computers, because when it installs two pieces, one called Report Designer, which is this guy, and another piece called Report Viewer, which we will look at here in a bit, but you can see the icon for that here as well. I have it pinned down to on my taskbar, my Report Designer icon. I'm going to launch that. When I click on it, what happens is it uses your Windows account that you log into your computer with, so your Active Directory account, and that's how it bases the security you get when you open the program. For those of you that use Dynamics AX, it's based on the roles that are assigned to you within Dynamics AX. If I click on the Security tab in the left here, you'll see my user in there, my Windows account, and it as an administrator, meaning you have access to do everything. There are other roles available for people. Outside of just being an administrator, there is a designer user, which has access to do everything except for those administrator functions like managing security. There's also a generator role, which gives you the employee access to go in and you can look at, view, and generate reports. You just cannot make edits to those reports. And lastly, a viewer only role. This role is for those folks that don't have any need to go in and make or create reports. They just want to view the report when it's finished. I'm just kind of starting with security here first, just because it's important, and you want to make sure that you have the folks seeing the reports that you want to see the reports. We had a case come up here a while back where there were some folks that had trouble when they're adding new users in. Well, they weren't able to get in there and see the reports automatically. So the solution for that is to use the groups that are available inside of Management Reporter as well. So for those larger companies that need to separate out different departments, the recommendation is to go ahead and create security groups within Management Reporter, and then add those folks that need access to that department into that. With that being said, those reports that have already been generated in the past, if they're based on the security groups, you add those users in there, they automatically can go in and see those reports without having to regenerate them and get the new security based on a single user on there. So just food for thought on that. Going forward, once you have all the security set up, you're in Management Reporter. Management Reporter uses building blocks to create the reports. The building blocks, they're called rows, which you can see along the left here in my navigation pane. There's rows, columns, and trees. To make one report definition, the requirement to do so, you have to have one row and one column at least inside of the report. The rows are generally the account structure, your main account within your account framework, and the columns kind of give it a time frame of what data you want to pull for the report, what year, what period, and so forth, whether it's year to date or just net change data. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is show you how to use the default reports that are inside of Management Reporter. Out of the box, initially it didn't come with these default reports, but eventually the program managers at Microsoft created some pretty handy reports that really give you a good baseline to start with on a lot of different pieces. So don't reinvent the wheel. If you can find one of these reports to work with, I would recommend doing so. If you don't see in your Management Reporter install this default report definitions folder, what you want to do is you go up to Tools, and then inside of here, you'll see this Import Default Reports option. What that will do is it will import all of these default reports. If you don't see that option in there, give us a call and we'll need to do an update on your Management Reporter. Should just be a half-hour, 45-minute process to get you on the latest version of Management Reporter so that those are available to you. The next problem with those that we run into is when people try to generate them, they don't do anything. Well, they're based on the account categories inside of Dynamics GP and Dynamics AX. So I'm just going to double click on this rolling quarter income statement one and show you what I mean by that. This will be helpful to show you how to get these reports to work, because when you generate them for the GP clients, they will not have any data in them. If I scroll over to the right here, you'll see I've already fixed this one. Let me see if I can find one here that may not have been fixed already. Okay, here we go. Here's an example on this cash flow. If I scroll to the right, you can see a lot of plus symbols. Those of you that are AX folks, these will actually have account categories listed in them. For the GP people, what you need to do is click in this column J on the row format of all of these different default reports. So double click on column J. There's also a link icon up on the menu bar that looks like a row format with a chain on it, right under the tools menu here. That opens the row links dimension. The GP folks, all you have to do is click on this Dynamics AX line and hit delete, and then click OK. And then you'll notice we're missing one of the link to financial dimensions columns, but now I have all of my account categories showing inside of here. So the goal would be to start with this. Most likely it's not going to work with your account categories. So you'll need to come in here and probably put your chart of accounts to match each of these different categories. For example, there's a sales line. What I would do is I would come in and I would just start by typing in my sales account. So my 4100 main account. All right. So then after doing all of that, I would save my row, close out, and then get back into my default report definitions, and I would be able to generate the reports and get data with them. I also want to show a couple of handy options where we get quite a few different support calls on. Tools and then options. In this window, there are some pretty handy features inside of Management Reporter that don't get used, and some actually cause trouble for people. In the newer versions of Management Reporter, there's a tool called the Web Viewer. I came into Management Reporter at Microsoft as it was first being developed, and I was very used to using the regular report viewer. So when it switched to the Web Viewer and Microsoft made that the default viewer, I probably immediately freaked out and like, whoa, I don't need to see this. But the Web Viewer is good too. It's all just a matter of preference. But there's this third checkbox here. Under Tools Options, check the box or uncheck the box depending on whether you want to use the regular report viewer or the web viewer. Both features or both items have full features, so it's just a matter of preference, and I myself like to have this box checked and use the report viewer. The top piece here, when you start Management Reporter or Report Designer, you have some options to start with. It'll open the last report you had been working on. It'll show the open window, which is this window here. If I go to File, Open, it'll pull this open so that you can quickly select a row, column, or tree, or a report. And you can also, when you're working inside of the column layouts, and I'll show you this here when we start getting into some key formatting things, every time you add a header inside of the column layout, it'll underline it. Well, if you're going to create a big column with a lot of headers that you don't need underlined, you're going to want to come in and make the change to this first. The big one here, and Carol is a big advocate for this one because she's always clicking the wrong X. And for those of you that don't know Carol, she's the principal consultant here and evangelist for now at Stone Ridge. She's always clicking the X in the upper right and closing Management Reporter and cussing and having to go back in. So what she does is she tells you to make sure you check this box. So then when you close Report Designer, it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to close out? So make sure you mark that. Down at the bottom here, some settings that aren't as commonly used, but report library location. When you're making a new report, this will generate the report to the library location that you want. Every report you generate in Management Reporter needs to go somewhere in the library. And along the left side, you can organize the folders and set up a folder structure so you can choose which folder structure you want to be your default. The report link location, we won't talk much about that, but that allows you to set a default location for when you're doing linking within your reports. This is where your files, the Management Reporter files location, this is where it's going to default for when you save items. And on the bottom, this is a pretty handy one. A lot of people love to export their reports to Excel. Well, this setting here tells it whether it'll go into Excel in print mode or normal mode. So normal mode is what I prefer. And what that does is it combines the headers of the report in with the regular lines of your reports. And I'll show you a difference on that, which I actually think I have here inside of my Management Reporter folder. So I'm going to open that up and just show you that difference right now. So if you've already have a lot of reports that are using Excel and you're using Excel, you'll need to go in there and there's a change on the report definition to make the change. So you'll need to change that even though they already have the report created. But here is the normal layout, which I prefer, where you can see the headers are within the document. In the print mode, oops, sorry, I don't need to see that guy. Here you can see the headers are built within the actual header of the Excel sheet. And I prefer the other method. Again, here, just like choosing to use the web viewer versus report viewer, it's just a matter of preference or what your managers are telling you what they want. All right, any questions from anyone at this point?
There was one question, Cory, related to distributing reports. How do you recommend you distribute reports to a group of employees that do not have access to Management Reporter?
Okay, so I guess in that scenario, my recommendation is to create them as viewers if it's possible. I understand that with the Dynamics AX, it gets a little tricky because they need to actually be a user, just a very minimal user within AX. But you have unlimited licenses. So if I go and check out my registration here, actually, they actually took it away. So there is no registration in MR anymore because users are unlimited. So I would recommend, if your GP, set them all up as viewer users. And then when you distribute the reports, which we're going to go into further detail here, distribute them out to a network share or into a library, because at that point they'll be able to go into Report Viewer And if you don't want to mess with the install, send them out to SharePoint or send them out to a network location. And then as soon as they click on the report saved out there, it's going to authenticate with their Windows account to make sure that they are a valid user of MR, even though they're not set up in GP. And that should account for getting those users that don't use GP. But AX is a little different story where you need to actually have them in there as a viewer, the viewer role, so that they can authenticate. But did they say whether they were AX or GP? Because I can follow up with them and give them more information too.
I believe he's on AX.
AX, okay. So yeah, I can follow up with them, Sabrina, after this and give them more information on that.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so on to the less time consuming items. We've already talked about security groups, default reports, tools, options. I'm going to go in now and I'm going to make a row format. So when I start a report, this is usually where I start. I start with the row definition. Whoop, not the report definition. I'm going to click on row definitions here in the bottom left and then click new. And you'll see here's kind of it's got an Excel look and feel to it. But what I want to point out here first is that I'm going to make an income statement. So I'm going to first put my description in here. And then I'm going to go down to the second line and I'm going to use this tool called Edit Insert Rows from Dimensions. So if I go to Edit and choose Insert Rows from Dimensions, you can see based on the demo company that I'm using, the Fabricam company we all love, here's my division, my account, and my department. This matches exactly what I have set up in Great Plains. You would see the same thing with AX as well. I am going to create my revenue section. So I'm going to choose a range, so 4,000 to 4,999. And all I need to do now is click OK. Up at the top here, you'll notice that there are pound symbols and then ampersands and then pound symbols. Well, the ampersand sign means that this segment I am going to use as the inclusion for my report. So I'm going to include everything that's an account segment only. I'm not going to worry about my division segment or my department segment. If I wanted to do like a detailed income statement, I could insert all of my revenue ranges by changing all of these symbols here to the pound symbol. And then if I click OK, it's going to give me a wider range of accounts. So I'll get every account that has a 4,000 in it with their division and department combination. But in this example, all I'm doing is the 4,000 to 4,999 range based on the main account segment. So I'm going to click OK, and as you'll see, it automatically inserts all of my accounts that are in that range. All right, so at the bottom of the income statement, we're going to have total revenue. So I'm going to double click in the format code and I'm going to underscore that section and I'll put a total revenue in here. Make sure I spell it right. And I need to total the total revenue section, or the revenue section. So going back up to the top, you can see I start on row code 100 is my header. Just a FYI here, when I'm creating a report, I always try to make sure that when I'm doing a range that I'm going above and grabbing either the description line in the section, or I'm also including the underscore amounts line, just in case you happen to add an account above or below your total range, then it's automatically included. So if I type in here 100 colon, I'm going to use 1900 as the line for the end of my range. That way, if I happen to have another revenue account that comes after 4,800, I'm going to insert a line here and it's automatically going to be included in my total. All right, so let's underscore this guy and then we're going to go down, put a little separator using the description line here. You can just leave it blank as well. And I'm going to do expense section. And I'm also going to go up and do the edit insert rows from dimensions again. And I'm going to type in 5,000. And I'm going to go to 9,999. And then I'm going to click OK. All right, here come all my expenses. Now I'm going to go down and do the same thing. But just to take a little shortcut, I am going to copy this section. And then I'm going to remember that my expenses line starts at 2020. Let's go down to the bottom, and I'm going to paste that in. Change this to total expenses. And I'm going to make sure that I get my correct calculation, so I remember that it's 2020 from above. Just a little hint on what the 2020 is. That's the row code here along the left. Each line has an identifier, and when you're doing a calculation, you use that row code to identify that line. 2020, and I want to go down to 5890 just to make sure that if I happen to have any accounts above or below where it starts, they're automatically included in my calculation. I'll leave that there, and now I'm going to do net income. And I don't remember what the total line was above, so I'm going to scroll up and get that. And it was 1930 for total revenue. I'm going to do another total. Before I forget, I'm going to put 1930 in here, but just want to show you, if you double click in these format cells also, you're able to get a list of what options you have inside the row. Some of the key ones you'll be using are tote, cal, description. We're going to show you the left, the right, and if time permits, we'll go through the CBR, and we'll also be showing you the column. And a lot of these underlined pieces here are pretty handy too. So here I want tote, and I want 1930 minus 5920. And then I'm going to double underscore it. Also, just a handy piece of information. If you're printing a report, sometimes it might be coming out on a second blank page. Well, that is because of this. There are extra lines at the bottom. We need to get rid of those. That way, you are actually printing to the bottom of the report. Okay, I'm going to read my notes here, make sure I'm saving everything correctly. Okay, I'm going to click save, and we're just going to call this MR webinar. Well, let's tell it what it is. So when you're naming the row format, you want to make sure and give it a good description. Usually the row format has a very similar name to what you name the report definition. All right, I click OK there. And now I have one building block out of the two necessary to create a report. And we're going to come back to that here in a little bit. Okay, I showed you the calculation range to choose headers, or to make sure that we're including every line within the calculation. And I want to go in and show you just a shortcut key. So sometimes you're going to add an account. Well, if an account is necessary, you might need to add it in between this line here. So say there was an account 9050. What you do is you insert a row, and then if you like using your keyboard a lot, if you scroll over to the right and if you hit the F3 key, it'll automatically open the dimensions window. So it's just a shortcut key that I want you to be aware of that, again, lessens the amount of time that you might need to be in Management Reporter with the moving from keyboard to mouse a lot. Again, you can double click in there just like this, or you can hit the F3 key within these windows and it's going to bring you to the next screen of it. I can go all the way to the bottom here and get to my chart of accounts and select what account I would want to add in that section. All right, let's get rid of that. The undo button up top, I'm going to get rid of that line I added, and I'm going to hit save again. Okay, next. Usually what you use next, these are called dimension value sets. What a dimension value set is it's a range of your accounts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one in here just for a couple of sales accounts. These are really handy for those folks where your accounts may not be in the order that you want them to be in. There are options to get that fixed, but it's a time-consuming process, and in the meantime, what's recommended is to use a dimension value set. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dimension value set with these two accounts. If I double-click in this in my link to financial dimensions section, I can go into my account section. And you'll see here there is a dimension value set option. I'm going to switch to using that, and I'm going to click Manage Dimension Value Sets. And I've already made this one just for the sake of time. If I click on the sales one and I click Modify, you can see what I have here is I have a dimension value set called Sales with the description of just sales. And what it does is it grabs my account range from 4100 to 4110. In those cases where your chart of accounts may be spread all over, let's say you want to have your sales also includes 4500 and 4800. Well, you have a lot of accounts within those ranges, so you can't just use a range, and you need to plug and play here. And what this will do is you create this once, and it's going to save you a lot of time in the future. And now all you need to do is use this dimension value set instead of going in and typing each account. So I'm going to choose the ellipsis here, and I'm going to choose the sales dimension value set and click OK. And you can see it has a little different look to it. If I click OK, now I have a sales line that takes care of accounts 4100 through 4110. And I don't want to have an account duplicated, so I'm going to get rid of this US sales retail parts line. So I'll do that by right clicking and choosing delete row. And now both of those accounts are accounted for up top here. Pretty handy trick for those, again, where your chart of accounts may be spread all over. Let's save it. All right, let's make sure. All right, so here we're going to go back and go into the distribution stuff. And I just kind of want to show you what's going on with it. I'm going to go over here, and there's one called Cory income statement. Oops, I need the report definition. So I'm going to click report definition first, and then double click Cory income statement. And if I go to output and distribution, here's where I kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier with the questions or up front. But anyway, you have the ability to generate to a single report library location. If I click the ellipsis here on this guy, what it does is it opens how you have your report library set up. The same thing that if you were to go to report viewer, what you would see. I'm going to click on report viewer. And here you notice that it's the same exact layout. You can come in here and you can set up a folder structure however you want. And then in here, you have the ability to choose to generate to multiple report library locations. Taking it a step further, you can generate to multiple locations. So if you use SharePoint, you can generate these reports out to your SharePoint site. We can also choose to go to multiple network locations. And this is one of those things where you would do for those users that are not GP users. And as far as the AX side, we can talk more about that. And then I'll have Sabrina send for those of you that are AX folks, make sure to let Sabrina know, and we'll send out some follow-up information on that. But in that case, they need to be a user, or the option is to generate the reports and then export them to Excel or XPS format. It's just an extra step that would need to be taken place for those users that are not in AX or GP for that matter. So if I click here, you can see I'm generating to an HR location, an accounting location, and an IT location. I have a shared folder set up here, and you can see this is where my reports are getting generated for those. There's Cory income statement, and you should see that in each of these different folders. When I generate it once, it goes out to those folders. And what you can do is you can set security on these folders. That way, if an accounting person comes out here and they click on IT, well, they can't get in there because you didn't give them permission to do so. Any questions to this point? Nothing?
Cory,
Okay.
I haven't seen anything come in.
Okay, I will keep trucking along here. Okay, report groups. Report groups are slick. Closing this. Going over to the left, I'm going to click on report groups. I am going to create a new report group. And what a report group is it allows you to create a group of reports, and you just need to generate that group once, and it goes through and generates that group of reports based on the date that you choose. So if I open the group, I can click add, and I'll just grab a couple of them at the top here. So I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to click OK, click add again, and I'll grab this one. And now I would just need to, I could make changes where I would want the group to be distributed and where I would want each individual report to be distributed. So when you do a report group, what it does is it creates kind of a window within the web viewer, and you can only open a report group in the web viewer to see it. And I can show you what that looks like here. But for now, I'm just going to click save on this. I'm going to call this Stone Ridge group. And I'm going to click OK. And to take that to the next level, Management Reporter has the option to schedule those report groups to run. So this is one of those items that can really lessen the amount of time that you come into the system. So you can choose to generate reports on a schedule. If I click New Report Schedule, I can choose to do an individual report or a group of reports. If I click the drop down, I'm going to choose my Stone Ridge group, and then I can tell this to run anytime I want it to, and as often as you want it to. Say, for example, if accounting reports, you give them 10 days to get all their transactions in and balanced, and you want to run the report as of August 31st, you tell it to run on, say, September 10th. Every month it runs on the 10th. It'll generate that group of reports for you, and it'll be out there where you want it distributed for those users to see. Okay, and some questions I know that there are that come up with this, and it revolves around printing that entire group. If I go out to Report Viewer, I believe I have a group out here, so I'm just going to open that, and then you'll see what it looks like. So it's going to open in the web viewer. Of course, it's going to ask me to log in. Okay, so here's what it would look like. So if you had 10 reports inside of your group, in order to come in here and look at them, you have to click each one. Now I've had mixed reviews of which way to do the actual printing of it. Initially, I used to recommend where you would download all of the reports to the XPS viewer. Well, since then I've kind of changed my mind, because that XPS viewer, sometimes the formatting gets a little wonky. So what I recommend is choosing Excel now. When you choose generating to Microsoft Excel, it's going to bring those reports all into one workbook where you can click print, and it's going to print the entire workbook at one time. Yes, it's an Excel format, but I've found that is the best option to ensure you get a nice layout of the reports, and all the data is there, the headers look nice and everything like that.
Cory, can I interject with a couple questions?
Yep.
All right. How can you schedule a report group to run with a different base period? For example, if I set up a schedule to print on the 2nd of each month, but I need the reports to advance to the next base period each month.
Okay. I believe this takes care of that. So if I go in here and if I go to my schedule, report groups. Okay, so you tell this to actually, here's where you would do that. So in the schedule, you tell it when you want it to generate. But then back on the group, if I go into the group, I can then adjust this base period. So my group is going to run based on S-1. This S-1 should take care of generating for 1 month prior. If you need to go a month, 2 months prior, if you just change this to S-2, this date is what it bases running on. So you can see when I go to S-2, it goes back to the 7th period. But S-1 here should take the group and go back, whoops. When I generate for October, you're going to get the September reports and so forth. Does that answer the question?
I think so, and if there's a follow-up question, go ahead and put that in the questions panel. I do have one other question for you, Cory. If you have a group of reports, can they be page number as if they were one big report?
If you're bringing it out to the XPS, I would have to test that. I do not know the answer off the top of my head on that one, but I can follow up with that one. Part of me thinks that we're going to have better luck in Excel getting those to page number properly, but let me follow up with that person, Sabrina.
All right, thank you. That is all the questions that we have right now.
Okay. All right, I am getting down there here. So let's go dimension value sets we covered. Let's flip the page, Cory. We did that. Groups. Okay, prettier stuff. All right, so we'll flip back to the PowerPoint slide here and we'll get down to the making it prettier section. So this part of the presentation is just going to go through some key options that you have available to you to make your reports look a little bit nicer and have a little flair. First off, I'm going to go into the side-by-side reporting. Go back to Report Designer, close out here. Yeah, sure, I'll save it. Close this and go to Report Definitions. I am going to open my balance sheet default report. So I'm going to expand my default reports and I'm going to go into balance sheet default. It seems to be acting a little slow here. Okay, there it is. So I'm going to open the last time I had generated it. Not a bad looking report once it gets up here, but I just want to show you the options so to do a side-by-side with this. All you need to do a side-by-side report with your balance sheet here is if I go into Management Reporter, Report Designer, open my row, and then I'm going to go down to row code 1690. And right here, if I double click in this format code, I can choose column. And what that's going to do is it's going to then do kind of like a column break inside of my report. And when I generate it here, you'll notice that I have kind of a side-by-side report with my balance sheet, where I'm going to see my assets along the left and then the liabilities and equity section along the right. Don't mind my my warning there for my balance item. I'm using that just to make sure that it shows correctly. So I'm just doing a balancing between there. But in that report queue, one thing to note is when you are running reports, if you see a warning message here, make sure to check that out because it's trying to tell you something that I see something that I think should be investigated in here. And in case my little rounding adjustment of 165,000 to make sure that my assets match my liabilities and equity came above my 10, my warning or my maximum amount of 10. So definitely something that I would want to investigate. But if you look here now, I have my assets along the left and my liabilities along the right. So make sure you print the report landscape, but it definitely adds a little bit of flair or option to that report. Okay, back to, yep.
Sorry, Cory, I have a couple questions here. Is there a way to get a side-by-side to align so the totals are on the same line?
Oh yeah, I believe we could do that. So when you say like this section here, yeah, it would take a little bit of work. So it would be like a trial and error process where we would have to make sure that there were a number of spaces after the net income line to make sure this was down there. But yes, I believe that would work by just going into the row and adding a few description lines down here. So yes, but a little bit of work, of course.
And when you get those warnings, how do you clear those out?
All right, so like in this case, the warning for this is a rounding adjustment on my balance sheet. So a lot of those folks that use like currency translation or rounding within their reports, you may get $1 here and there, and but you want to know if it's more than $1. So what you would do is on the row format, you come up and go to, I think it's edit, and then rounding adjustment, and you can see what the options here are. So the rounding adjustment row, this is where the value is going to go that accounts for making sure things are in balance. So if my assets are higher than the liabilities by 10 bucks, there's going to be a $10 line there, and it'll show you that $10 rounding adjustment. My total assets line, my liabilities, and what it does is it checks the balance between these two, and if it's over $10, it's going to put a warning message. So For me to fix that, what I do is I take out these pieces altogether, put my rounding adjustment at 0. I click OK. I go and run the report again, and then I look at the balances on my report to see where I think the problem is. And then when I know that I have the problem fixed, then I will turn my rounding adjustment back on. Once the rounding adjustment is fixed and you run the report, you will no longer get a warning message in the report queue. So tools and then report queue status. This would go away and it would not have a warning message. But to see the warning, you click on it and then you can scroll down here and you can see that rounding adjustment. But that's how I would fix it. Anything else before I move forward?
That's all the questions that I have right now.
Okay. All right, let's get back into, I'm at the top here still. Okay, I am going to open my IS row. Okay, and I'm also going to create a report definition just called the same thing so that when we run this, we can see it. So I'm going to go new report definition. I'm going to choose the MR or IS MR webinar. So I'm assigning my building blocks. So here's my first required one. And my second required one I'm going to make now quick. So I'm going to go to new column definition. A column definition is kind of the time frame of the report. And there's a requirement on a column for you have to have 2 column types in there. The first one is a description. This grabs the description from the accounts inside of the row. And then you also need to have a financial dimension column. And that is where you grab the data from. So it's grabbing data from that financial dimension column in the row format. So I'm going to create one for periodic, which grabs my net change data, and one for my year-to-date information. And you can click in each of these cells to see what the options are for them. And most of the time, it's going to be periodic and year-to-date. So my description and FD are there. I would be able to save this column as is right now. I'm going to go to the top here and I'm going to use some auto text to kind of describe these columns. If I double click in the header 2 cell, I can click this auto text drop down and I'm going to put the month name in here. And over here, I am going to put the calendar year. So it's automatically going to fill this in based on my period or my fiscal year or calendar or my calendar year. So I'm going to click save and I'll call this MR webinar. Usually what you would do is something like this, where you would say PER_YTD. So that way you know this is what's in that column and you don't have to go searching for it. But just to keep things separated, in my case, I'm using that in the front. The beauty about MR is that you can use these building blocks as many times as you want. So if you have a rolling 12-month column that you want to use for many income statements, you go for it, because that's going to save you a lot of time in the future having to go in and make a column for each report. Just keep in mind that when you do make changes to that single building block, it affects all of those reports that it's used in. And an easy way to see where those building blocks are used in, if you just go over to the left and find your building block, if you right click on it and go to associations, it'll tell you where it's used. And in this case, I'm not using this one at all. All right, let's save that. And now let's go in and choose the MR webinar. And what do I got for my steps here? Okay, let's just run it and let's kind of see how messy it looks. And then we're going to clean it up. So MR, so IS, webinar, click OK and click generate. And there, so rounding on is usually the last step before it pops on the screen. And as you can see, I'm using my the report viewer. And if I scroll down, you can see I've got a start here. But if I were to turn this in to Carol, she would laugh at me or tell me to pack my bags. So I definitely need to do a little bit of work here. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of all these lines that don't have any data. And then I'm going to add some images on here to make them look nicer, and then some colors. So to do that, I'm going to close this. And let's first start by getting rid of the lines that don't have data. So if I click on the Settings tab, I'm going to uncheck this box because if it doesn't have data, I don't want to see it. So let's do that and we'll save it. And then I'm going to go to the row format also. Report, and then if I go down to the row, there's a shortcut icon right beside the row format that I'm going to click and it'll open my row. I'm going to add boxes around my revenue and expense section. So to do that, I'm going to insert a line at the top. And if I click in this format code, I have a BXB for begin box. And I'm going to insert a line underneath the revenue, and I'm going to put BXC. So that stands for close the box. So it's going to create a box around this section. I'm going to do the same thing down below, but what I'm going to do first is I'm going to copy this section, and I'm going to go down to my expenses. I'm going to insert a line above it, insert a line below it, and paste. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have a nice section for boxes. Let's go ahead and add some color. So to do that, if I go up to my revenue, I'm going to click on my revenue section, and then if I go click on the drop down, I'm going to choose this header blue, and it does not look like Chicago Bears colors by accident. Sabrina, you were supposed to laugh at that.
Oh, trust me, I was laughing.
Okay, so there I have some color. Let's go and add an image to this guy now. So the row is good. We're going to see some big improvement on that. I'm going to click save. I'm going to close this. Now we need to go into the headers and footers section to add the images. So I'm going to take a couple of things and move them to the left. I'm going to take my company description. I'm going to get rid of this unit description, and I'm going to hit Control X, Control V, and I'm just going to move those guys to the left. And I'm going to add an image over here on the far right. To do that, if I click Images, I have a Stone Ridge logo loaded. You can go out there and you can load your logo. To do so, if you click Add, you'd be able to go out here and find your different images on your computer, and then you can add them in there, and then they stay in here for use on other reports. I'm going to click Insert, and you'll see it. I mean, it doesn't look like anything fancy yet, but once we generate the report, it's going to look a lot nicer. Okay, let's save it, and I'm going to hit Generate. Actually, I wanted to change the report date, but we'll see what we get here. We'll get the gist of it. All right, let's see what we get. Okay, not too bad. Definitely a little easier to manage here. You can see I got my headers on the left. I've got an image on the right. I got my revenue, my expenses, and some color in there. What else I would do is, yeah, I don't know. It looks all right. So just to show you a couple different things here that I can do, I can move this section to be out more closer to the middle if I needed. And to do that, what I would do is if I go into my column layout, I can go over to the left side here, and if I click Insert Column, there's an option for Fill. So if I choose Fill, and then if I go, let's just move it over 15 characters and see where that gets us. I'm going to save it, go back, and I also want to kind of segregate out my headers just a little bit more. So if I go into the row, I can come in here and use a format code to left justify my revenue header and my expense header. And what this does is it avoids the fill column. So you'll see that I'm able to separate out and see a little bit of segregation between my headers and my accounts, because the fill column, those left and right justifications will not pay attention to the fill column. And we'll keep refreshing here and make sure that pops open and kind of give you an idea of how that looks. And here you can see we got a little bit more of a breakout of those pieces. So just kind of want to give you an idea of what options are available in there for making your reports look a little nicer if necessary. Okay, so that I'm going to go back, I'm going to remove that section and kind of show you. I don't use that often. It's not necessary all the time, but if you are looking for something like that, just know that it's available. Getting rid of the fill column, closing, yes, save it. Back to the row, clicking on the icon for the row, I'm going to get rid of the left justification, and I'm going to get rid of the left justification down here on my expense header. And what I like to do is I like to indent rather than using that fill with the left justification. So to indent and get a little bit of separation, I'm going to grab my revenue section. If I highlight each one of them, up on the menu bar, you'll notice there's an increase indent. So I'm going to click that for that section, and the same for my expense section. And let's get down to the bottom there, and we'll do the same thing, increase indent. All right, so then I can generate that, and you'll see what we're doing there. And while that's running, I'm going to show you a couple of other options you have within the row. So say, for example, you want to show your report in with your sales in order from highest to smallest. Well, you have the ability to do a sorting on it. So I'm going to insert a line above it again. And if I click in this format code, I can choose to sort the range of rows based on a column value. I can choose to sort based on the absolute value of a column, or I can do that in descending order. Anyway, here's my report coming back. As you can see, my revenue section is on the left. Here's a little indent for the cost of goods, and then my revenue total is back to the left. So I'd probably come in and I would add some more color to that too, just to keep things uniform. Okay, let's sort this. So let's do this one. Just a regular sort. So the next thing I need to do is I need to tell it what column I want to sort it on. So I know in the column layout, column A in my column definition is my descriptions, B is my month-to-date information, and C is my year-to-date information. So let's just go column C there. And let's click save. Whoop. Related rows. Sorry, I need to tell it the range that I want to sort here. So do that. I'm going to sort 190 through, let's go down here. I keep passing my total for sales there, through 1870. So let's go 190:1870. So sorry, this is actually telling it what range I want to do the sort on. So I'm going to sort my sales in order from 190 through the bottom of my sales section or revenue section. I close that, save it. I'm going to change this to 4 of 2017 where I know that I have some good data. Save and then generate. All right. Okay, so if you look over here on the right, yeah, it looks like it's sorting on absolute value. What I would do is I would go and, no, it's not. I must have a setting wrong on that. So let me go to one of the other income statements that I used for. That doesn't have it. No, that's this one. Rows. Okay, so yeah, I had chose the sort descending order, and what it would do is it would take the lowest value and then it would sort from lowest to highest, or you would want to do highest to lowest. But what I would expect in that scenario is when I looked in this report, I would see 489, then my cost of goods, and then yeah, just going 419 and so forth on the way down. So any questions on that?
I'm not seeing any questions at this time, Cory.
Yeah, we are getting close to the end here. I've got a few more things to cover. I'm not quite going to get through all of it, so we can send out an email at the end with the rest of the items. I wanted to add a department onto this. So a tree adds an additional level of breakdown for your reports. In this case, I have my departmental breakdown. So you can see I inserted all of my departments. You can use the edit, insert reporting units from dimensions here as well. And I'm going to get a breakdown now of my income statement by department. So if I close that now, I'll save it. Click save here, and then I'm going to click generate. I want my 4 of 2017. Generate. I'm going to choose all my departments. And then if I run this guy, I'm going to just show you another little handy trick for formatting. Of course, when you add a departmental tree, it does take a little longer to run because you're creating really 10 or 11 departments based on where you were just getting one. So at the summary level, I'm still going to get the same values that I was before. But if I click now through my different departments, you can see a breakdown of each of those departments. So department 00, 01, and then 02. Well, if we look at this 01, you can see it's baffling to me, but I don't know how there wouldn't be any expenses in here. But if I don't have any expenses in that section, I would really think it would be the other way around. But let's show you how to get rid of this section because I don't want to see it if I don't have data for that. So if we go back to the row format, we're going to suppress those lines if there's no data in them. So to do that, there's this option here in the related formulas and rows and related formulas, rows and units section that'll suppress a header based on the total of another one. So if I scroll down, I can get to my total revenue section. That's 1930. If I put 1930 here, it's going to suppress this line if 1930 doesn't have any data. So I would do the same thing on each of these. I would suppress this underscore. I would suppress this underscore. And I'm going to do the same with expenses, and we'll rerun it and just kind of show you how it makes the report a little bit tidier or a little more tidy. So 5920 is what I want to base this one on. So let's go back up there. So we've got 5920. Scrolling down a little more. 5920, 5920. And let's see what happens there. Save it. Close, and then we'll regenerate. Any questions come in while that's generating?
There are no questions right now.
Okay. Okay, here it comes, almost there. All right, let's look at section 1 here, and you can see now all of that expense section is gone. So it makes it look just a little bit nicer. I'm not showing a bunch of data that really doesn't have any data. All right, let's go back here. So fonts, I know I showed you this Chicago Bears font, and usually about 3 weeks in, Krista says, it's time for you to go out and play with the kids and stop watching football, because normally the Bears are down by 20, 30 points at halftime anyway. So I have a couple of girls, so if I want, I have a lot of pink around the house. So if I wanted to create a report based on that stuff, I can come in here and do any sort of custom formatting or custom format that I want to show. If I click new, I can just call it my pink. Cory. Pink. And then I can choose the color. It would be pink and so forth. And I could then use that on any of the reports that I wanted. So you would come up here, and then in the row drop down, you would have the ability to click and choose another custom color. So just keep that in mind when you're putting your images on those items, and then you're not seeing a font that you want for your color. Go ahead and go in there and find the font that matches your logo. All right, we've got 1 minute left. I wanted to show a few more items here. If I go into the balance sheet default totals, this guy. So what I wanted to show here is just to report how you can break out the totals. I'll run this, and then like I said, what I'll do is I'll send out, have Sabrina send out an email to the folks that were on the call with the notes, the different slides and things like that, and the pieces that I covered. There are a few that I'm not quite going to get to that I think you would like to see, so we'll get those out to you. This section here, I just was breaking apart the totals with the columns. So here you can see these values actually add up, but I'm telling it to only show my actual account data in this column, and then the total data is over here on the right. So to do that, it's in the row format, and I'm telling my accounts you can show in column B, and column C you can show over in column, or my totals show in column C. The thing is with that, in your column layout, you have to have the same exact date range. So I'm grabbing year to date for both. And then the other thing, I don't know if you noticed that over here, 2017 is spreading across my two columns. To do that, you can spread columns in here, or spread your headers in the column by double clicking in. I'm using auto text, but I'm making sure it goes from B to C. All right, Sabrina, I'll open it up for questions if there are any more. If not, thanks everybody for listening, and I appreciate it.
I don't see any questions coming in, but if you guys have any, feel free to send them along. Or if you have a question later after the webinar is over, feel free to send us an email or give, and Cory can answer any questions that you do have. I also want to invite all of you to check out our website at stoneridgesoftware.com. We have a list of all of our other upcoming webinars and events on GP coming up here, and I know that we are planning a couple upgrade webinars for the AX folks as well. So keep an eye on that, and we hope to see you all at a future event. Thanks, Cory.
Yep, thanks everybody.